The chamber of the Galactic Council was an architectural marvel, a symbol of unity among the countless species of the galaxy. A grand hall of crystalline spires and shimmering light, it pulsed with the energy of centuries of interstellar diplomacy. Delegates from over 1,000 worlds gathered in a semicircle, their holographic screens displaying complex languages, data streams, and voting results. Today, however, the air was thick with tension. At the center of the room stood the humans, a small delegation led by Ambassador Evelyn Cross. Their dark suits and sharp gazes contrasted starkly with the more flamboyant attire of the other species. For decades, humanity had remained a minor player in galactic politics, adhering to treaties and keeping its head down. But today they stood defiant. Above the council, a massive holographic projection displayed the proposal under review, Directive 1178, Territorial Reassignment for Resource Optimization. In plain terms, it meant humanity's colonies in the Persei cluster were to be ceded to the Econ Alliance. The reason? Efficiency. Ambassador Cross intoned the voice of Supreme Arbiter Valtrix. The towering insectoid leader of the council loomed above the humans, his faceted eyes glinting with authority. You have been granted the opportunity to present humanity's position before this directive is finalized. Be concise. The council has no patience for theatrics. Cross stepped forward, her face unreadable. Behind her, a small contingent of human diplomats and military advisors stood silent, their expressions carefully neutral. The eyes of the galaxy were upon her, waiting for humanity to acquiesce as they always had. She cleared her throat and the room fell silent. Supreme Arbiter, esteemed members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice calm but firm. For decades, humanity has honored the Council's directives. We have paid our dues, contributed to the greater good, and upheld the laws of this esteemed body. But today you ask too much. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Several delegates glanced at one another, their whispers translated into every language in real time. Cross's eyes swept the room. Directive 1178 is not a request for cooperation. It is a demand for subjugation. You seek to strip us of our homes, our resources, our sovereignty, all in the name of deficiency. And to that, humanity has but one response. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. Then, with a voice that cut through the tension like a blade, she said, "No." The word echoed through the chamber, amplified by the acoustics of the hall. For a moment there was only silence. Then the room erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of disbelief and outrage. The holographic display flickered as data feeds struggled to keep up with the sudden surge of communications. "No," hissed Representative Krill of the Econ Alliance, his serpentine form coiling with agitation. "You dare defy the Council's decision? You, a minor species, dare to reject our authority?" Ambassador Cross didn't flinch. "We dare because we must. Humanity will not be bullied into surrendering what is rightfully ours." Krill's eyes narrowed, his forked tongue flicking in irritation. "This is not defiance. This is madness. The Persei cluster is critical to the stability of the region. You humans cannot possibly defend it against the threats it faces." At this, General Marcus Hale, the military advisor standing behind Cross, stepped forward. His uniform bore the insignia of the Terran Defense Fleet, and his steely demeanor commanded attention. "With all due respect, Representative Krill," he said, "we've defended ourselves before. And we'll do it again if necessary." The room grew even more chaotic. Some delegates laughed, dismissing humanity's bravado as empty posturing. Others looked concerned, exchanging worried glances. Supreme Arbiter Valtrix raised one of his many appendages, and the room fell silent once more. His voice was cold and measured. "Ambassador Cross, General Hale, do you truly comprehend the implications of your refusal? To defy a directive is to challenge the authority of this council. It is to risk war." Cross met his gaze, her voice unwavering. "We understand, Arbiter. But what this council fails to understand is that humanity has limits. We have bent, we have compromised, but we will not break. Not now. Not ever." In the observation galleries high above the chamber floor, representatives of lesser-known species watched the unfolding drama with rapt attention. Many of them had endured similar treatment from the Council, forced to cede territory or resources under the guise of optimization. For them, humanity's defiance was unthinkable, and yet inspiring. One such observer, a frail-looking being from the oppressed Ninari race, whispered to her companion, "Do you think they'll survive this?" Her companion, a grizzled veteran of countless diplomatic failures, replied, "I don't know. But for the first time, someone has said what we've all wanted to say." Back on the chamber floor, the council's deliberations continued. Valtrix turned to the other delegates. "The matter will be put to a vote. But let it be known that if humanity chooses to isolate itself from the will of the council, it will face the consequences alone." Cross's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "We are prepared for that, Arbiter." As the votes were cast, the holographic display filled with data. Species by species, the council members registered their support or opposition to humanity's defiance. Unsurprisingly, the Econ Alliance and their allies voted overwhelmingly to enforce Directive 1178. But among the smaller, often overlooked species, something unexpected began to happen. A growing number of them abstained from voting, or, in rare cases, voted against the directive. It wasn't enough to sway the outcome, but it sent a message: humanity's stand was not unnoticed. When the final tally appeared on the screen, Valtrix's expression was unreadable. "The Council votes in favor of Directive 1178. Humanity, you have until the next solar cycle to comply. Failure to do so will result in enforcement by the Council's peacekeeping armada." Cross inclined her head as if she had expected nothing less. "Understood, Arbiter. But let me make one thing clear: humanity will not comply. If the armada comes, they will find us ready." With that, she turned and walked out of the chamber, her delegation following close behind. As the humans exited the council building and stepped into the cold expanse of spaceport lights, General Hale glanced at Cross. "Do you think they'll really send the armada?" She nodded grimly. "They have to. They don't, they risk looking weak. And the council would rather burn a planet than admit they're losing control." Hale smirked. "Good. Let them come. We've been preparing for this moment for years." Cross looked up at the stars, her eyes reflecting both determination and a glimmer of hope. "Then let's make sure they regret it." The stage was set. Humanity had defied the galaxy's most powerful authority with a single word. And while the council prepared for war, the humans prepared for something far greater: to prove once and for all that they were a force to be reckoned with. The news of humanity's defiance spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Broadcasts of the Galactic Council session replayed on countless worlds, showing Ambassador Cross's unwavering stance and the single word that had sent shockwaves through the interstellar community: no. For some, it was a source of outrage. On Econ Prime, the capital of the Alliance that sought humanity's territory, the streets were filled with roaring crowds. Their serpentine overlords hissed fiery speeches, whipping their people into a frenzy of indignation. "The humans dare reject the wisdom of the Council?" thundered Archon Virus, leader of the Econ Alliance. His elongated body coiled around a raised platform as he addressed billions through the holographic broadcast. "They have spat in the face of order and peace. This is not just an insult to us, it is a declaration of rebellion against the entire galaxy." Others, however, saw humanity's defiance as a spark of hope. On the oppressed worlds of the Ninari, laborers paused their work in the mines to huddle around makeshift screens, watching the humans stand tall against the Council. On the Zillar outposts, whose people had long been subjected to resource optimization directives, whispers of rebellion began to circulate. For the first time in centuries, the iron grip of the Council was being questioned. In the days that followed the Council's decision, humanity mobilized. On Earth, Luna, and the colonies of Mars, the Terran Defense Fleet readied itself for the inevitable confrontation. Massive orbital shipyards operated at full capacity, churning out warships with startling efficiency. These weren't the lightly armed patrol vessels of decades past. These were sleek, heavily armored ships bristling with advanced weaponry, a fleet that had been quietly constructed over the years, hidden from the Council's prying eyes. Admiral Elaine Torres stood on the command deck of the TDS Resolute, the flagship of the fleet, as it orbited above Earth. She was a seasoned leader with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, a veteran of humanity's wars before they had joined the Galactic Council. She surveyed the holographic display of the fleet's readiness with a sense of grim satisfaction. "Status report," she said, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the bridge. Commander Harvick, her second-in-command, stepped forward. "Fleet readiness is at 92%, Admiral. We've accelerated production on the new kinetic rail systems for the frigates, and the orbital defense platforms are now fully operational. Ground-based installations are reporting combat readiness as well." Torres nodded. "And the Aegis protocol?" Harvick hesitated for a moment before answering. "Still untested, ma'am. If it works, it'll be the game changer we need." If it doesn't, Torres's lips tightened. It'll work. It has to. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the Persei cluster, the colonies targeted by the Council began their own preparations. Civilian transports ferried families to safer locations, while militia groups drilled relentlessly in case they were called upon to defend their homes. Governor Elias Vance, leader of the Persei colonies, addressed his people in a broadcast transmitted across the cluster. His weathered face and commanding presence exuded calm in the face of impending danger. People of Persei, he began, we stand at a crossroads. The Council believes us to be weak, that we will bow to their demands as so many others have before us. But they underestimate the spirit of humanity. We have survived on the frontier, endured hardships they cannot imagine, and thrived. This is our home. We will not surrender it. Cheers erupted from crowds gathered in the colony centers, their determination growing with every word. Despite humanity's bold stance, the Galactic Council was not idle. The Council's peacekeeping armada, an interstellar force composed of ships from dozens of member species, began assembling at a staging point near the Persei border. Supreme Arbiter Valtrix convened an emergency meeting with key Council members and military leaders. In the vast war room of the Council's central station, a holographic display showed the growing human fleet and their defensive preparations. This is unprecedented, Valtrix said, his many appendages gesturing toward the display. A species as young and inexperienced as humanity should not possess such a formidable military force. Their defiance must be crushed swiftly, or we risk setting a dangerous precedent. Admiral Sirith, a reptilian strategist from the Zevron Collective, studied the display with a calculating gaze. Their fleet is impressive for their size, but it is no match for the Armada. Our forces outnumber them 10-1. We will overwhelm them with superior numbers and firepower. Overconfidence is a flaw we cannot afford, interjected Admiral Klen of the Morinx conglomerate, her crystalline form shimmering in the dim light. Human ingenuity has surprised us before. We must not underestimate them again. Valtrix nodded. Then we proceed with caution. The Armada will move into position, but we will issue one final ultimatum to the humans. If they persist in their refusal, they will face annihilation. Back on Earth, Ambassador Cross stood in the United Nations headquarters, addressing representatives from every corner of humanity. Her speech was broadcast to billions, a rallying cry for unity in the face of an existential threat. This is not just a battle for territory, she said, her voice resonating with passion. This is a battle for our right to exist as a free people. The Council sees us as a nuisance, a species to be managed and controlled. But we are more than that. We are innovators. We are survivors. We are human. The room erupted into applause, the sound reverberating through the building and across the airwaves. Humanity was united as never before, galvanized by the threat of extinction and the refusal to bow. As the deadline loomed, the galaxy watched with bated breath. Would the humans stand firm? Would the Council follow through on its threat? And, most importantly, what would happen when the inevitable clash occurred? On the bridge of the TDS Resolute, Admiral Torres stood before the viewscreen, staring at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there the Armada was gathering. Somewhere out there, the future of humanity would be decided. Orders, Admiral? Commander Harvick asked. Torres's eyes narrowed. We hold the line. Let them come. The galaxy had expected humanity to cower in the face of overwhelming odds. Instead, it found a species ready to defy, to fight, and to prove that the word known carried the weight of unyielding resolve. The Galactic Council Armada surged across the star lanes, a force of unparalleled size and might. The combined fleets of over 100 species gleamed under the light of distant suns, their hulls adorned with the sigils of their homeworlds. It was a show of overwhelming power, a statement that no single species could defy the will of the Council and survive. At the Persei border, humanity's fleet lay in wait. The contrast between the two forces could not have been more stark. The Council's armada stretched across the stars, its sheer size blotting out the light from nearby systems. Humanity's fleet, by comparison, was compact and efficient, a fraction of the armada's size. Yet each Terran ship gleamed with precision, its lines sharp and menacing, a testament to the ingenuity of human engineering. Admiral Elaine Torres stood on the bridge of the TDS Resolute, her hands clasped behind her back. The holographic display before her showed the incoming fleet in chilling detail, each enemy vessel marked with precision. They've crossed the line, Admiral, Commander Harvick reported, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Estimated time to engagement, 15 minutes? Torres nodded, her expression unreadable. Activate the Aegis protocol. Deploy the drones to the outer perimeter. And send the signal. The signal, a single encrypted burst, traveled faster than light, reaching every corner of humanity's colonies and outposts. It was a message that needed no explanation. Every soldier, pilot, and civilian understood its meaning. The time has come. On board the flagship of the Council Armada, the Triumphant Dawn, Supreme Commander Zaurik watched the Terran fleet with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. Zaurik, a towering insectoid with chitinous armor and multifaceted eyes, was a veteran of countless campaigns. He had crushed rebellions, pacified unruly sectors, and enforced the Council's will across the galaxy. But never had he faced a foe as audacious, or as enigmatic as humanity. "They've drawn their line in the sand," Zaurik said, his voice clicking and buzzing as he addressed his officers. "We will obliterate it." His second-in-command, a feline-like strategist named Jaren, studied the tactical display. "Their numbers are pitiful, but their formation is disciplined. They're clearly prepared for a fight." "It won't save them," Zaurik replied. "They lack the numbers, the experience, and the allies. This is nothing more than a desperate last stand." As the Council fleet advanced, humanity's preparations came to life. Drones poured out of the carriers, forming a dense, shifting screen around the fleet. These weren't simple recon drones. They were heavily armed and equipped with advanced AI, designed to adapt and swarm like a hive mind. The first clash was a symphony of chaos. Council destroyers surged forward, their energy weapons lighting up the void. The drones responded with a coordinated assault, their railguns and plasma cannons ripping through shields and hulls with surgical precision. For every drone destroyed, 3 more Council ships fell. On the Resolute, Admiral Torres monitored the battle with a calculating eye. "Focus fire on their vanguard," she ordered. "We'll break their formation piece by piece." The Terran fleet moved with breathtaking precision, each ship acting as part of a larger whole. Cruisers provided cover fire for the smaller frigates, which darted in and out of enemy lines, exploiting every weakness. The carriers hung back, releasing wave after wave of drones, while the capital ships unleashed devastating barrages from their railguns. The Council Armada, accustomed to overwhelming their foes with sheer numbers, struggled to adapt. Their ships were powerful but designed for brute force, not the rapid, coordinated strikes of humanity's fleet. In the midst of the chaos, humanity's secret weapon came online. The Aegis Protocol, a network of experimental shield generators and energy disruptors, activated across the fleet. The void around the Terran ships shimmered as the shields absorbed enemy fire and redirected it back at the attackers. Council ships found their own weapons turned against them, their energy beams and missiles reflected with deadly precision. On the Triumphant Dawn, Zaurik watched in disbelief as his ships faltered. "What is this?" he demanded. "They're bending our attacks back on us." Jaren's fur bristled as she studied the data. "It's a form of energy manipulation we haven't seen before. Their technology, it's years, maybe decades ahead of what we thought possible." Zaurik slammed his clawed hand against the console. "Impossible. They're a young species barely out of their cradle. How could they?" "Perhaps we underestimated their potential," Jaren interrupted, her voice low. "And their resolve?" The battle raged on, but the tide had turned. The Council Armada, for all its might, was being pushed back. The once proud fleet, a symbol of the Council's absolute authority, was now a fractured, desperate force. On the ground, across the Persei colonies, civilians watched the battle unfold through live broadcasts. Cheers erupted as Council ships were destroyed, their debris scattering across the void. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy's oppressors were being beaten back. But humanity's victory was not without cost. The Terran fleet suffered losses, each fallen ship a painful reminder of the stakes. On the Resolute, Admiral Torres received reports of casualties with a heavy heart. "Admiral," Commander Harvick said, his voice tinged with urgency. "The Triumphant Dawn is retreating. The rest of the Council fleet is following suit." Torres's eyes narrowed. "They're regrouping. They won't give up this easily." But even as she spoke, a new signal came through, one that silenced the bridge. It was a transmission from the Supreme Arbiter himself. "Humans," Valtrix's voice echoed across the comms, his tone cold and clipped. "You have made your point. Stand down and we will reconsider the Council's decision. This conflict need not escalate further." On the bridge of the Resolute, silence fell as the crew turned to Admiral Torres. She took a deep breath, her gaze steely. "Open a channel," she said. The galaxy held its breath as humanity prepared to deliver its response. The bridge of the TDS Resolute was utterly silent, save for the soft hum of the ship's systems. The crew held their breath as Admiral Torres stood at the center of the command deck, her eyes locked on the holographic transmission of Supreme Arbiter Voltrix. The alien leader's visage, imperious and cold, flickered with faint distortions. His towering, multi-limbed form exuded authority, but beneath his calm demeanor, a glimmer of unease betrayed him. "You have made your point, humans," Voltrix repeated, his voice tinged with forced composure. "The Council is willing to renegotiate. Stand down, and we can find an arrangement that spares your species further loss." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Every instinct screamed at them to accept the offer, to end this before the Council's wrath returned in full force. But Torres stood unmoved. Her second-in-command, Commander Harvick, leaned closer and whispered, "Admiral, this might be our chance to secure peace. We've inflicted damage, but if we push further..." Torres raised a hand, silencing him. Her face betrayed no emotion, her gaze fixed on the hologram. "Open the channel. Audio only," she ordered. The communication officer complied, and Torres took a step forward. She clasped her hands behind her back, exuding an unshakable calm. "This is Admiral Elaine Torres of the Terran Defense Fleet. You requested a response, Arbiter. Here it is." She paused, allowing the silence to stretch, every heartbeat echoing in the ears of the crew. Then she spoke a single word. "No." The word reverberated through the transmission, simple yet monumental. The Arbiter's image froze for a fraction of a second, then distorted as his composure cracked. "No," he hissed, his voice rising. "You dare?" "Yes," Torres interrupted, her voice steady. "We dare. The Galactic Council has ruled the galaxy through fear and oppression for centuries. You have crushed dissent, exploited the weak, and called it order. No longer. Humanity will not yield. If you want war, Arbiter, then you'll have it. But know this, we will not stop until the Council falls." Voltrix's form loomed larger as he leaned toward the camera, his many eyes narrowing. "You cannot comprehend the forces you are challenging. Your defiance will lead to your extinction." Torres tilted her head slightly, unfazed. "Perhaps. But we've already proven one thing, haven't we? You can bleed." The channel closed with a final crackle and the hologram disappeared. The bridge was silent for a moment before erupting into cheers and applause. The crew's fear had transformed into fiery determination. Torres turned to Commander Harvick, her expression still calm. "Have our fleets maintain defensive positions. They'll come back, but not today." Harvick nodded. "And when they do?" Torres's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "We'll be ready." In the days that followed, the galaxy stood at the precipice of change. The Council's defeat at Persei had sent shockwaves through its member species. For centuries, the Council's authority had seemed absolute, its power unchallengeable. But now humanity had shattered that illusion. On distant worlds, whispers of rebellion grew louder. Disenfranchised species, long crushed under the Council's heel, began to see hope in humanity's defiance. Smugglers and traders carried tales of Terran ingenuity and courage to every corner of the galaxy, their stories spreading like wildfire. On the Council homeworld of Aegis Prime, the chamber of the Supreme Council was in chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices a cacophony of panic and anger. Supreme Arbiter Voltrix presided over the chaos, his claws tapping an erratic rhythm on the armrest of his throne. "They've exposed our weakness," one delegate, a serpentine Grecian, hissed. "If we don't retaliate now, the entire galaxy will rise against us." "And throw more ships into the grinder?" countered a Crothery, its tentacles writhing with agitation. "Their technology is beyond anything we anticipated. We need time to understand it before we act." Voltrix raised a claw, silencing the room. "Enough. Humanity's defiance cannot go unanswered. If we falter, our authority is meaningless. But we will not strike in haste. Prepare the fleets. We will regroup and crush them when the time is right." On Earth, humanity prepared for the inevitable. Factories on every colony world ramped up production, churning out ships, weapons, and advanced defenses. Scientists worked tirelessly to refine the Aegis Protocol, unlocking even greater potential from their technology. But humanity was not alone in its defiance. Across the galaxy, allies emerged, species that had long suffered under the Council's rule and now saw a chance for liberation. The resistance grew, a coalition of the oppressed united by a single idea: freedom. In the heart of this movement stood humanity, no longer the young, naive species the Council had dismissed. They were now a beacon of hope, their defiance a rallying cry that echoed across the stars. The Council would return, of that there was no doubt. But when they did, they would face not just humanity but a galaxy united against tyranny. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy dared to dream of a new order, one built not on fear but on unity and justice. And at the center of it all was a single word, spoken with unyielding conviction: